What is this?
HuffPost delves into the many struggles facing Justice Democrats, the progressive group that endorses progressive candidates and gets quite a few people elected, at least in the past. The ladies of the squad are Justice Democrats. Jamal Bowman is another example of a Justice Democrat. But right now it seems that the left-wing coalition is disintegrating, unfortunately, and progressives have different ideas on how to rebuild it. So I'm gonna give you a few excerpts, and Cenk is also quoted in the piece. But before we get to Cenk's quote, first the details on the Justice Democrats. Just over 6 years since its founding, Justice Democrats' opposition is more organized while its mission is more muddled and its coffers depleted. Faced with a shortage of funds, the group laid off 9 of its 20 staff members in mid-July, a move that took many prominent progressives by surprise.
I'm not that surprised by this, because contrary to what a lot of people think, the environment where progressives do best is not when we're being faced with like far right opposition. The environment in which progressives do best is when the problems that we face are unambiguously the fault of like neoliberal governance and incompetence, because that way it's really easy to point the finger at them. The problem is that like right now, the most important thing to do in American politics is to fight the fascists. And that is equally the case if you're a liberal, progressive, socialist, or communist. So exactly. The political climate currently favors liberalism because it's seen as a safe and proven alternative to fascism, as opposed to like, fascism is facing us down. Let's put our faith in this like new, like radical progressive worker. Well, so that's public perception. I'm not saying I agree with that. Obviously, I fully support the progressive line, but to a lot of voters, they're gonna think of it as another unnecessary risk.
And they seem to be returning their main focus back to electoral politics and away from advocacy on policy. Except it should be noted that the Justice Democrats have not yet announced any endorsements of primary challengers, of candidates in open seats, and that is a stark change from what they did previously. Previously, like the whole point is to primary corporate Democrats in Congress, and they again have yet to endorse any new candidates. And
there's not really a wedge to get them on right now, right? Like, think about it. Before there was Black Lives Matter, because during Black Lives Matter, progressives had the front seat, like it was the progressive Democrats and the progressive activists who were the loudest and most prominent during BLM, because it was like an advocacy movement. And then there's like Medicare for All, but nobody talks about Medicare for All. Dude, Medicare for All is so cooked, It got talked about in 2016, and then like it faded away, and now like the fascists are here, and it's such a big deal. And, we're not even going to get a public option. We're all going to go bankrupt from a medical problem. Like, that's it, That's all we get.
I'm curious.
Casey J, I saw that link the first 4 times. Everyone, please remember, I see your links when you first post them. You don't need to repost them. If I ignore them, it's for a reason. Like, I'm not going, like, if you describe a link, here's Kyle doing a soy boy for Orb Mommy over AOC, I don't care.
You think about that, Cenk?
Yeah, look, when we started Just Democrats...
Contrary to what some of you people think, Kyle Kulinski is not and probably never will be an enemy of this channel, okay? I like Kyle. And I like Marianne Williamson, too.
Yes, we started Just Democrats. And by we, I mean both me and the co-founders like Shavkat Chakrabarti and yes, Kyle Kulinski and Zach Exley. But also we, as in you guys, the audience, you gave literally millions of dollars to start this group. And we launched it here on the Young Turks. And we were all very clear. You have to challenge the establishment. That's the whole point of this organization. And in the first cycle, we ran 78 races. Zach's original idea, he's one of the co-founders, was to run 435 or 535 races if we could, right? Now that was too ambitious, but I loved him for it, and it was the right way of thinking about it. And then we only won 4 out of the 78, but normally you get a lot of ha-ha out of that. Oh, your winning record's not that good, your winning percentage, etc. But that was a hell of a 4. AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and Ayanna Pressley, and they made a giant difference in the beginning, right? So we were going in the right direction, but then the organization, for some reason, started worrying about their winning percentage, and then they started running less and less people, and they started running them in only super blue districts because they thought that was more winnable. That's fair, it is more winnable in super blue districts.
I'm kind of torn on this because I think there's a good argument to be made for what Cenk is saying, and I think there's an argument to be made against it. On one hand, I do think a gigantic scattershot approach is important because the DNC does basically no work or outreach in red states or in like a lot of contested districts that could potentially go blue, but they don't put in the effort because they don't have like the on the ground infrastructure or the energy, and like all the consultants are from New York City. So, you know, like imagine a DNC consultant from New York City trying to plan out strategy for getting a candidate to like win an election in some like potentially swing district in Alabama, and they're like grimacing as they go down there and talking to people. Yeah, it's this contemptuous like coastal elite bullshit really fucks them over when it comes to dealing with areas like that, middle America, that kind of stuff. So I get that argument. At the same time, I did see people giving the Justice Dems a lot of shit for their low winning percentage early on. It is possible that like by doing too much of a scattershot approach, you do kind of dilute the organization, both in terms of focus and funds, and you end up leading people to disrespect the org. I think the problem is that nobody really cares about the Justice Dems anymore. The Justice Dems were exciting for a while, and I still think the Justice Dems are better than your average Democrat, but the name Justice Dems does not elicit this like countercultural like I guess like attitude. It makes me wonder if the future of progressive advocacy in the Democrats is like decentralized, where you would have leaders to rally around, but not like a title to go by. Does that make any sense? Bernie Sanders did really, really well because he was a great candidate and he commanded a lot of respect, but it wasn't like the Bernie-crats were a actual group that had like funding and staff, you know? It felt like a flash in the pan, and you can make more flashes in the pan. It's not like you can only, you know, it's not like that might only happen once. Vosh, how did the Tea Party succeed? So the thing is, with the Tea Party, the problem is that politics work differently on the right. The right is more willing to concede to reactionary politics because it doesn't necessarily interrupt their pro-business goals. Fascists love collaborationism, but the Democrats aren't, because progressive Democrats are almost always more anti-corporate than neoliberal Democrats. So the Tea Party made a fuss and then got folded in to the Republican Party, effectively supplanting their goals and moving them rightward. You know, whereas with the Justice Dems, they kind of have to fight and scrape for every bit they get. The DNC just isn't willing to do this leftward lurch as much as I would like it that they do. So our strategy has to be a little bit different, you know? Yes, the Tea Party also has a lot of, or had a lot of money. There's always going to be more money circling around in right-wing environments because, well, you know.
But we got to scare some people in purple districts, otherwise we can't get their votes in Congress. Because the point isn't to get AOC elected or any one of these people elected. The point is to pass bills,
right,
to pass policy priorities for progressives. But along the way, both the legislators and the group, unfortunately, lost their way and they took their eyes off the prize. I have more on that in a second.
In fact, okay, so this is a perfect time to mention one of the biggest obstacles for the organization at the moment, which is fundraising. So I'm going to give you the quotes. Alexandra Rojas, who is the Justice Democrats executive director.
Yeah, Annie, I think I agree. If like your primary goal here is to win Congress, right? And you want to win Congress with enough seats that you can potentially sway policy. So maybe in the future you actually can do a kind of force the vote situation, or get cabinet appointments where you have power as progressive Democrats. And in order to do that, you don't just want to have AOC win in super ultra mega blue environments, right? You want to have like progressives win all over the country, but that's easier said than done, right? You know, I mean, I would love to see like 5 new junior Democrat progressives come in from Louisiana, but that's not like, saying that is one thing. It doesn't mean it's really like, you know, doable.
Director told HuffPost, quote, "We are vulnerable to sudden changes in grassroots giving. The ebbs and flows for us are bigger." Now remember, Justice Democrats, you know, they take small dollar donors, grassroots money, and this is my speculation, but you're going to get less funding from grassroots donors if they feel that you are not delivering for them. So I'm going to give you a few examples. When there are headlines about Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez voting present when she should have voted no on an extra $1 billion for Israel, right? That's on top of the funding that we already provide for Israel every single year, billions and billions of dollars. That showed a level of weakness and the willingness to honestly turn her back on the people who have supported her and promoted her and defended her as she's being attacked by corporate Democrats, right?
Yeah, I don't like this attitude. AOC has done votes that I disagree with, and I've stated that disagreement. But like, holy shit, man, we have to accept that even if we got a squad of ultra-communists in Congress, there's so much wheeling and dealing that goes on behind the scenes that they will inevitably one day vote for stuff that just seems like a betrayal of their values or whatever. Like, so many bills go through Congress, and there's so much stuff that happens that we don't get any insight onto. If they're good like 95% of the time, that's set for me. You know, I don't want to like, because if you set that standard, it's like, well, you're never, like, if Bernie had won and become president, he also would have done stuff that we wouldn't have agreed with because he is the president. He's subject to interests and information that we will never know or understand. He is literally the most powerful man on earth. But if he does most things right most of the time, that's still a huge win. I don't like this attitude. That being said, it is true that AOC and other Justice Dems have to play a game where they have to appear as though they're challenging the status quo, but at the same time, they can't risk coming off too combative, or else liberal Democrat media will fold them in with the MAGA crowd as the enemy of liberty, you know? Like, I can see the MSNBC lines now, you know? In a time where our country faces great threat and peril from the MAGA crowd and anti-democracy types, AOC and the Justice Dems have opposed a Democrat bill, thus aligning with them, you know, that kind of crap. It's really, really, really difficult to manage. I do not envy AOC.
That's one example I have in mind. When they fail to, like, I mean, the latest example, in my opinion, when it comes to AOC, and I don't mean to harp on her. I've seen some failures when it comes to Justice Democrats in Congress across the board. But she just goes on Pod Save America, and without trying to get any concessions from Joe Biden, prematurely endorses him, saying, given the field, yes, I endorse Joe Biden for re-election.
And why would you do that? Look, I think Israel is an ironic example because they've actually been the toughest on the issue of Israel overall. 9 just Democrats voted against, saying that Israel is not a racist state, and they held the line even though—
I just wonder how much, like, would her have withholding her endorsement mattered when we know that's where her endorsement was going to go? There's literally no other Democrat contender, you know? Like there's no, like, that's the only real option. It seems like at that point, any withheld endorsement would have been a transparent virtue signal. Like, oh, you know, there's only one real person I can endorse, but like, let me think about it. I actually think that Biden should pass Medicare for all first. You know, I don't know how well that would play in an environment where it's so obvious how things are going to pan out in terms of Democrat support. Maybe not.
They got a lot of blowback from Washington, and all of this is nuance. And by the way, Alex Rojas was definitely part of the initial leadership team, and was a huge part of the successes that happened, and that's why she got the executive director position. Corbin Trent was an incredible part of the organization originally, et cetera, and they've done great work. Just Democrats have done great work overall. There's 11 Just Democrats in Congress when nobody thought that that was possible. Now, having said that, look, on economic issues—
why not endorse Marianne? Because Marianne isn't even trying to get ballot access. Like, Marianne is doing some advocacy work, but like, this isn't a real contender for the presidency. I think endorsing Marianne would have been irresponsible, not only because you don't want to endorse somebody who has no chance of winning at all, because that makes you look like a bad decision maker, but it also would have been kind of an insult to Joe Biden to go like, oh, you know, Joe Biden will obviously win the primary because there is no primary, but like, yeah, I'll toss my endorsement over to somebody with no chance because I'm that disgusted with Joe. And while that may seem like it's playing hardball politics, it also alienates AOC from people who are really invested in Joe Biden winning. No, it is. It's like an unwinnable game, funny rhetorician. Like, but I see both sides of this because I'm a big brain enlightened centrist, like I always have been. Tim Cool. I'm like Tim Cool. I'm a centrist. There we go.
They just didn't fight. And so I don't think it's speculation at all. I think it's stone cold fact to say that you're getting less grassroots funding because you didn't deliver. And that breaks my heart because we started Just Democrats together. And I want to come out here and tell you we did deliver, and we did awesome, and we did exactly what we were supposed to do. It's not we anymore, I'm not part of the group anymore, but you remember when I left the group, I backed him 100% anyway.
Sorry. Well, I have a pledge that I would like to make to all of you. So long as I am in control of this channel, I will never, ever wear a hat. What's with the hat? I'm Tim Cool.
Anyway, right? Eyes on the prize. How many times did you guys hear me say eyes on the prize? But when we had the prize, it's something like $15 minimum wage. I know for a fact that they chose not to fight. And they said, oh, Bernie Sanders doesn't want to fight. The legislators in the House don't want to fight. Well, who cares? Push them to fight. That's the whole point of Justice Democrats.
The Justice Dems have terrible foreign policy. Yeah, I remember this. AOC and Marjorie Taylor Greene join forces to back doomed Gate Syria troop bill. Yeah. Man, guys, never listen to a leftist when it comes to foreign policy. As I've said before, you would legitimately have a higher likelihood of getting a good take listening to a liberal, even like an MSNBC liberal. I'm not joking. That's how bad leftists are when it comes to foreign policy. Jesus.
If you had told me you're going to get 11 Justice Democrats in Congress, I would be like, yes. If you told me they're not even going to fight for $15 minimum wage, I would be like, that can't be right. That can't be right. That their paid family leave is going to die on the table, and no one's even going to push back. I couldn't believe it. They're not even going to fight for voting rights, and that they were going to go with a strategy. And this one is on Pramila Jayapal, and I asked her to be a Justice Democrat personally, and now I completely regret that. Her strategy was trust Biden. How'd that work out for us? It worked out terribly. We didn't get any of our policies. The only thing we got was some action against climate change in the Inflation Reduction Act. But then Biden's like, hold on. It seems like I'm helping you a little bit.
Yeah, they did try to fight for the $15 an hour minimum wage. They didn't like give it. I guess like, do you guys really want progressives in Congress to be like nonstop 24/7 advocates for something, no matter the context or whether or not they have enough votes? Doesn't that make them come across as really like politically ineffective and annoying? Like if they tried to get the $15 an hour minimum wage passed and then it didn't work, do they like the next day they just show up and keep screaming about it? I understand that's what the Republicans do, but I don't know if that would work with Democrats. Is that what we want? Is it just like ruthless, unyielding noise machines that don't have any kind of like bone for political strategy and will just do the thing like wind up automatons? Maybe, you know what? I don't know. Maybe that would be better. Really, maybe it would be. I genuinely don't know. That doesn't feel right to me, but maybe like politics is that stupid.
Psych. Instead, what I'm going to do is totally neutralize that by allowing drilling everywhere, including the Willow Project in Alaska. I'm going to give Joe Manchin a pipeline, even though he destroyed 85% of my agenda. I'm going to gratuitously have more and more drilling. So that turns into a zero, and you didn't get anything else. And then you wonder why your funding dried up. Like they have these total excuses, and I gotta say, I talked to Danny Morales who did that piece, and I just thought at the end that the piece seemed to emphasize, oh well, golly gee, the great grassroots funding is drying up for everyone. It's not their fault. Well, why do you think grassroots is drying up? Because there's no hope left. Because we can't even get the bare minimum passed. We can't even get them to fight for the bare minimum. Don't pretend that $15 minimum wage was not the bare minimum. That voting rights was not the bare minimum. No progressive in their right mind can pretend that. And don't pretend you fought for it. You're on the record. You did nothing to fight back.
This part right here is just stupid. This is empty posturing. Different people in the Justice Dems and the Democrats have at varying points fought for these things to varying extents. This is just like preachy, screamy, how dare you, how dare you, how dare you bullshit.
I just feel that just based on what we can see publicly, there's a lack of strategy and a lack of, it seems like they don't really talk to one another or plan on what their plan of attack is, right? And in fact, there was an aide who spoke to HuffPost about this, and this is what they said. So this is a progressive senior House aide. We have huge champions like Bernie Sanders, AOC, Ilhan Omar, who are able to be successful political fundraisers, but movement-wise, we're not in a great place right now. And one House aide conceded that Justice Democrats aligned incumbents lacked cohesiveness and did not have regular group meetings with Justice Democrats. Other than some Israel bills, we never talked about legislation. There's a perspective that people with Justice Democrats win their race and come to Congress and do their own thing.
That's not a
if that's the case, if that's an accurate reflection of their like internal strategy, that's really dumb.
Perception. That's a stone cold fact.
Yeah.
That is absolute reality. And you guys have heard me allude to it before. I don't reveal private conversations, but I tell you generally.
So what do you think the best time to fight against corporate Dems is? I don't like that question because a lot of people don't seem to understand the like materialist side of political shifts. You know what I mean? The time to fight against corporate Dems is all the time when you can and not when you can't, it is a fact right now that like the current liberal or the current political climate favors liberalism because it's seen as a safe alternative to fascism. If you want to press back against like corporate Democrat behavior, there are times to do. I've talked about it plenty, but I don't. Your first goal in politics is not, well, when do we get to fight the corporate Dems? Your first goal in politics is wake up, smell the roses, and think, what is the most important thing to do right now? And the answer to that is fight fascism. Why do I see so many leftists online who ask, when's the time to challenge the corporate Dems? And not, when's the time to invalidate fascism at a political level? I never see that question get asked, which is weird to me because that is by far the most important priority. It's leagues more important than any individual policy issue, because the consequence of failing on that particular front are magnitudes greater than the harm done by continuing the status quo. But people don't wake up and say, well, okay, well, how can I most fight against the agenda of the Republican Party? Because leftists don't care about that, because that makes them feel like they're liberals. Instead, it's, well, how do we oppose the corporate Dems, you know? Well, here's step one. Make the average Democrat voter not so insanely terrified of fascism that they're willing to accept risky alternatives, or what they perceive to be risky alternatives, to liberalism. If you want a progressive movement, then what you need is stability. And in order to get that, you have to push back against the fascism. That, I think, is the most important thing to focus on.
I was shocked to find out there's no strategy, no planning, no leadership on anything. And it's not just Justice Democrats, that's also other so-called progressives in Congress. Yes, that includes Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. Nobody ever talks to anybody. They don't coordinate. How the hell are you gonna pass something if you don't go and talk to people and you don't have come up with a plan, a strategy? Look, and then if somebody proposes a strategy from the outside, everybody's too good now. Oh, I am a congressperson. Oh, I am a senator. Who cares? What have you done? What have you done? So do something.
I don't know what he's referring to here. I have never seen AOC go, I'm a congresswoman. I don't know it. I might be right about this. A lot of new progressives like Maxwell Frost are supporting Israel. I did see the Maxwell Frost vote on Israel, man. Gen Z progressive says he's pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian. What the? This was old. This is from 2022. It really just feels like if you want to succeed in American politics, you can't be anti-Israel, because if you are, people say it's like, oh, it's the Jews, oh, it's AIPAC. No, it's not. It's the cynical Democrats and Republicans in power who will disingenuously accuse you of anti-Semitism in order to politically handicap you. It's the same thing that happened to Corbyn, right? Corbyn got accused of being anti-Semitic, and that ended up like frying him electorally. But it wasn't Jews doing it. It was people it was Gentiles in his own party who were deliberately inflaming those accusations to fuck over Corbyn because they didn't like him. So it's not like, as always, the Jews aren't behind it. They're just a scapegoat. Except in this case, they're being used disingenuously as a scapegoat from the from the other side. You know, like, oh, how dare you be anti-Semitic by being anti-Israel? And this is being said by like a GOP congressperson whose staff is filled with Nazis. You know, and the Nazis will repeat it too.
Something. And guys, we're dying for leadership. So if AOC, for example, who's the most prominent of the Justice Democrats, said, that's it, I'm leading, I would love it.
Yeah, because there's no other room to talk, funny rhetorician. Like, you have to be pro-Israel to be American. You have to, because the politicians and media don't like front anything else, because Israel is like the perfect Mont Bailey for the establishment, okay? Because support for Israel is like the crux of support for American foreign military intervention and support for like apartheid regimes. Like, if you support Israel, then you can justify support for any bad thing abroad. They're like the focus point on that. But whenever a person like challenges what's happening in Israel, you get to accuse them of being an anti-Semite, which is still, at least nominally, not a good thing to be in American politics, in spite of the fact that the GOP is filled with Nazis. So like it's like, oh man, you want to like roll back our support of an apartheid regime? Looks like you're an anti-Semite. It's like really convenient for the people in power, you know, who are again not Jews. They're just people using Jewish issues disingenuously to front their own agenda, the same way Nazis do, frankly.
Even if I didn't agree exactly with the plan, and even if I thought, well, you know, I would do it in a different way, who cares? At least she's leading. At least she's bringing together a coalition. She's fighting back against the establishment. Did it happen? It's a verifiable fact that it didn't happen. And so it breaks my heart to tell you that, but that's the situation we're in. I hope that some of this gets through and they begin to realize that they've let the grassroots down. You can't say,
I also regret to inform you, you can't, quote, destroy the establishment from within when there are like 10 Justice Democrats and hundreds of Democrat congressmen.
Oh, I let you down, I didn't get you anything you wanted, but give me money. But give me money anyway. That is not a compelling argument. But my guess is they won't listen to anybody. They have Washingtonitis. All of them do. All the reporters do. All the groups do. The legislators do. What is that? They think that Joe Biden actually got a lot done. They're so happy and proud of themselves. They're like, what do you mean? We got a little bit of climate change in there. Yeah, And people are still complaining. Look, guys, in Washington,
He's coming across kind of hysterical here. I feel like there's a good point underlying this, but he's like freaking out. You cannot make all of your policy goals happen when you're like a dozen Congress people and you have a whole Senate and then there's all of the rest of Congress. You know, like, yeah, he's too wound up right now. All right. Like, oh man, we got a dozen progressive Congress people and they didn't get everything we wanted done. Oh, that's why you're not getting funded. That's not how it works. Like, Jesus Christ. Imagine if Republican donors, like corporate donors, stopped funding because they have like a couple MAGA guys in Congress and they didn't single-handedly like subvert the election in 2020. You know, it's ridiculous. Like, that's not how this works. Yeah, it's just rage against the system shit. This is like phony populism. Populism without an understanding of how populism functions. Where are these chips on their shoulders they have coming from? Well, this like fake populist outrage is necessary because they're shifting away from the left, so they're trying to pull over people whose main political bent is being, quote, anti-establishment, rather than people being like principally left-leaning. Though Anna Kasparian's going to have to rein in her talking points a little bit, because you can't do a good I'm a economic populist bit while also arguing that we need federal task squads to investigate shoplifting.
that might work in the bubble because everybody's nuts in Washington and everybody on cable news is just as nuts. And they're like talking about how Biden's FDR. But for the rest of the country, they're like, where the hell is higher wages? I mean, Joe Biden didn't even offer the public option, let alone Medicare for all. And you never held him to account. Did a single Justice Democrat ever say Joe Biden is a liar? He said he'd do the public option. Not only did he not do it, he didn't even propose it. Joe Biden said he'd do $15 minimum wage and he threw it under the bus at the first opportunity. Did any of you call him out on that? No, they went with the trust Biden strategy. That got.
I don't think they went with the trust Biden strategy, and I'm pretty sure I've seen tons of progressives call out Joe Biden for not fronting a public option. Also, didn't the $15 an hour minimum wage thing die in the Senate? And then after the whole thing with the Senate parliamentarian, a bunch of people criticized about. I'm pretty confident that I remember having seen lots of people criticize Biden on like every element of this. Maybe not enough. I mean, how many times do you have to say it? I guess. Like, what's the 50 times? 100?
Got their ass handed to them. That's a fact.
Well, a former Bernie Sanders campaign operative, Karthik, are you familiar with Karthik?
No.
Okay, so Karthik Ganapathy says that, well, you know, it's really hard to challenge incumbent Democrats, like in this particular time, especially with Biden's few progressive accomplishments, which makes it challenging, makes challenging the establishment.
No, I think the main thing is the threat of fascism. It's not the perception of Joe Biden having done well. I think it's the fact that Americans are scared.
Less urgent
because Biden got progressive accomplishments on Planet Xandu or wherever the hell this guy's on.
This is the co-founder of Left Flank.
Are you?
Okay. When there's a big gap between where the president is on legislative priorities and where the left is, it becomes really important for the left to take on a more confrontational posture. But comparing, for example, the role of single-payer advocacy groups during the Affordable Care Act fights versus the role of groups like Sunrise Movement in the Inflation Reduction Act process, it's night and day. I generally think the White House and the Biden campaign see progressives as part of their coalition, and that counts for something.
No, it doesn't. Legislation counts for something. You thinking you're part of the coalition and having tea with Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden counts for nothing. Show me the bills. Show me the fight. This isn't why we started Justice Democrats, so you guys could all be famous and get along, be super comfortable in Washington and get along with your goddamn colleagues. None of us are interested in your colleagues. There's only
it's literally just a Jimmy Dore segment. I know Cenk likes to yell. I'm not saying that's new or anything, but like again, I feel like there's a legitimate point underlying this that's being bowled over by fake rage. That it like you're overstating the point significantly. The problem is that like getting work done as a progressive in Congress is hard. And I'm not going to pretend that anyone is doing it perfectly, but to go, you know, this like hyper reactionary, zero IQ, small brain, like, you know, we didn't elect you so you could go have tea parties with Pelosi, like shit. It's like, you're not taking it seriously. Jesus, Benjamin. You're not really taking it seriously. You're just using it to posture your own brand, which is funny because I'm pretty sure that Cenk and Anna Kasparian are right-leaning compared to AOC and Ilhan Omar, at least from what I've seen. Yes, Jimmy Dore did come from TYT, in addition to like a lot of bad people. Now he's directly lying. Kyle can spit out 20 to 30 policies. He's happy with the Biden admin in under a minute. Well, no, yeah, the Biden admin has done more good than I expected him to. Not as good as I wanted him to, of course. But you know, that's obviously that threshold was never going to be met.
One thing we're interested in: pass the bills. Pass the bills.
Pass the bills.
And until you do that,
magically, even though there's only like a dozen of you and Congress has over 400 people there, pass the bills. Why aren't you passing the bills? Why didn't you magically make the Senate shift, even though there are no Justice Dems in the Senate? Why didn't you force Biden, the parliamentarians, to shift the bill? Do it all. Magic. Do it magically. Magic.
No interest. Like, who's going to do fundraising for you guys? Rah, rah. Let's get more no bills passed? Not in.
It's like actually like listening to a kid. Rah, rah. Let's get more no bills. It's like a clickbait YouTuber trying to talk to 8-year-olds. Oh, man.
Interesting. So they need a lot of help, and it doesn't even seem like they recognize the problem. They don't even realize they have a massive problem. It isn't because of cycles. It isn't because you didn't do your email list right.
I love being literally the most principled person on the left, because it's so easy to make a lot of money and get a lot of attention with the fake populist fervor, where nothing is ever enough for you and every possible solution is not going to pan out exactly how you want it. So why even bother? Why even engage with it? You know, I could do like the burn your bus. I could do like all of it, all the time, everything. And instead, like, I'm like the one leftist who will sit down here and I'll say, listen, okay, your number one priority is not challenging the corporate Dems. It's fighting fascism, you loser. Get your head out of your ass, okay? You did not become a leftist so you could politically distinguish yourself from your annoying parents, all right? Get over yourself. You're not a revolutionary. You're a dude typing online shitposting, okay? Make the world a better place in the ways that you feel you can, and quit overvaluing yourself. Quit pretending that this is some grand conflict in which you are the star. Like, quit acting as though you were going to strike out the corporate Dems by getting a couple of progressives elected to Congress. Like, come on, man. But like, that sells so well. It sells so well because people love hearing that. It was like when talking with the Vanguard boys, where I would make out like every argument that I had for like, listen, this is why I think you can only get these things done. Like, you have to know what you can get done, because if you don't know what you're capable of getting done, you'll waste your time trying to do things you can't. And then every time I'd finish anything, it was like, well, then how do we challenge the corporate Dems? Like, every time, right? Like, it's like, that's like the only thing I care about. Like, hey, here's a strategy to stop fascism. Here's a strategy to oppose the spread of fascism in the world's most powerful country, which would probably set in motion a chain of events that would not only lead to our deaths, but the death of like the entire like global network of political and economic engagement that allows for the modern standard of life. Standard of living increases the rest of the world around. Climate change, like everything will fall apart. And they're like, okay, yeah, like whatever, like you're probably overstating that, but like the corporate Dems are more responsible shepherds of this country than 99% of progressive leftists ever could be. And that is a serious, you know, like indictment of the effectiveness of progressive lefties in the West, you know? That's how bad it is. Like, Jesus. It's like, I swear to God, it's like all leftist discourse got like co-opted by Kremlin talking points where, hey guys, good leftist foreign policy is opposing America all the time, no matter what, regardless of the context, no matter what, just always do that. And good internal policy is being anti-establishment and populist, even if the establishment has better ideas than you do, and even if the populism is completely aimless and without direction, you're not actually accomplishing anything, and you have no idea what you're talking about, you don't understand how this works. It just reminds me of how, like it's like how many, I see lefties get tens of thousands of retweets on Twitter where they will blame Joe Biden for state law being passed in Republican states. Or they're like, so you want us to vote Democrat in 2024, even though all these anti-trans laws are happening? It's like, well, where are the anti-trans laws happening? In red states, but they don't engage with that because they don't know how it works. How can you say we vote Biden when the Supreme Court's tearing apart our rights anyway? The Supreme Court is currently red-leaning because of the people appointed under Trump's term. So if Hillary had won then, and then Biden had won, it would be a left-leaning Supreme Court, and we wouldn't have any of this. These problems are all downstream of Republicans. Well, how did Biden fix them? He can't fix that wasn't, he can't fix state law. That's not what the president does, and he can't undo previous Supreme Court appointments. You just have to not have Republicans win. If Republicans don't win, there's not an issue here. if Republicans lose, then we have more room to challenge corporate dem policies because people aren't voting entirely based on what they think will be the safe alternative to fascism. We can do this, guys. It's not difficult. I am engaging in like sophomoric political analysis here. This isn't heavy shit. I'm not using my whole brain. I'm using maybe 4 brain cells at most. This is obvious, but lefties stumble at this time and time again. We saw earlier that segment where Jim Cramer was like freaking out and comparing people to Marx because of the idea of union striking or whatever. That is the level of political engagement in terms of like the bar for IQ that I see lefties engage in time and time again. But we don't get as upset by it because when we see them, we think, oh, well, at least there are retards. They're not. They're not my retards. They're not my retards, and I don't claim them, okay? I don't know what the fuck they're doing. Like, all these people who have no clue what fascism would do to this country. Real fascism. Joe Biden's a fascist. You have no idea what fascism is. I want you to know what fascism is, okay? Go to Myanmar or Burma or what. Go learn what fascism is, okay? Please, go to any country that is actually definitively fascist and express contrary political views to the running government, okay? Go learn, all right? Jesus. This is like an Americanoid thing, or I guess Westoid in general, but like you guys have no idea how lucky you are to live in countries where you get to be belligerent little shits who have no idea what you're talking about and not get shot in the back of the head and black-bagged, okay? Because that's not a permanent thing. That's not guaranteed. That's not like an innate property of human governance, you know? You could very well live in a country where you will get black-bagged and shot in the back of the head. That happens in parts of the world today. It's happened historically in other parts of the world. It could still happen today here if the wrong people win the right elections. I'm really just trying to keep you guys safe. I just want people to be safe. I just want this country to be a free, open space where socialists have the ability to advertise their superior economic and political philosophy without being black-bagged and shot in the back of the head. That's it. I have to wade through this sickening, acrid mire of retards and grifters and fake populists with people who have nothing to say but screaming, who have nothing to offer the political conversation outside the aesthetic, the neon sign pointed to them, screaming, look at me, ma, I'm not a liberal. Look, I hate the corporate Dems. Great, hate the corporate Dems. Take the hate to the mass grave they'll leave you in, okay? You just don't know. You have no idea. You have no clue. You have no clue how bad things can get. You're so lucky. You're so lucky. You have no idea, but you will if we lose. It's end of history nonsense. Fukuyama clapping his hands appreciatively as he reads your average leftist Twitter post where the idea of a safe, like, bourgeois democracy in which they can express their retarded ideals is taken for granted, you know? Like, unironically, though, like, all the lefties are like, yeah, dude, well, you know, Trump was where Biden's a fascist too. It's like, oh, yeah. End of history, man. Yeah, sure, we did it. Yeah, nothing can happen in this country that'll lead to you guys getting mass grave. You'll never be loaded onto a train. That'll never happen, bro. End of history, man. Jesus Christ. Yeah, not even Fukuyama. Yeah, Fukuyama's moved away from this. You know, 9/11 basically threw that in the garbage. No, Philomath 20, that's what I'm saying. There are legitimate points that he and Anna were making that I don't necessarily disagree with. That's why that's why if you overshoot the case, you know? Like, I think it's okay. Like, people do this all the time because because it's like the dial, right? Like you turning the dial that says populism on it, looking back at my audience to see the reaction. Like, hey, the corporate Dems are f***ing us over. They're like complicit. They're willingly incompetent against fascism. Yeah, like turns back towards crowd, turns the dial right even further. Also, the Democrats are just as bad as the Republicans anyway. Corporate Democrats, corporations, that's like fascism, man. They're just as bad as each other. Yeah, turn back everyone. Turn it even further right, you know. Yeah, actually, I think Democrats are worse because at least like Republicans are trying to change things. Yeah, like but like this pipeline exists, you know. So annoying. You have to dial it in.